You missed me, ladies and gentlemen, friends, fans, and patrons. It is so good to be back for another episode of Seamus and boy, oh boy, of Seamus. I'm sorry, of Shamer. My goodness, Shamer, where we are bringing shame back, and shame on me for mispronouncing the name of my own show. What a narcissist I am. I can't keep my own name out of my mouth. Today's stories are quite spicy. Republican Congressman Max Miller tells Lizzie Marbach not to speak about her faith in Jesus Christ publicly, citing a separation of church and state in a bizarre tweet, which he later apologized for. Trump has been indicted again, and parental rights continue to be dismissed by the courts. Here to talk about it, we have the one and only Ron Coleman, partner in the Dylan Law Group, podcaster, and Twitter master. Ron, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Damn glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm very glad you're here. So those of you who follow a little show called Shimcast IRL will know that the first episode I ever hosted all by myself actually had you on as the guest.
That's right. They say I make it easy for the hosts, and I think I really did that time.
Yeah, you basically carried the show on your back. It was a wonderful thing, and I appreciated that because
It got a little hairy.
got a little wild. But the thing is, you stopped onto the show the day before when Poso was on, our boy Poso, and Tim said that you were going to be the guest the day after, and I was like, I got to talk to this guy, and so I pushed Tim out. There was a little bit of a soft coup that happened behind the scenes there. I ended up taking over the show, and then you and I had a conversation about some pretty interesting topics, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And it was interesting to me that Tim was unable to speak for a while after that.
Mhm.
You know, you really just deprived him of the gift of speech.
He
And
was left speechless by my performance as host. Yeah, I was blessed to take over his show for a whole week, a little while after
I'm
that.
sorry, America was blessed.
America's Thank you. Thank you, Ron. You're absolutely right. The
You gotta
United
look.
States
Framing is everything.
That's right, you're right. The United States was blessed by my presence as the host of Shimcast for that week.
How many
And
people have we lost at this point, you think, by virtue of this repartee? Because I think you and I are enjoying. I know you and I are enjoying it, but
100%.
who else is buying into? I mean, we don't even have, like, at least in Timcast, we had a crew of sycophants around us. So
Mhm.
the deal is everyone laughs at everyone else's jokes,
Mhm.
and this way we keep the show rolling for 3 hours. But that's why this isn't a 3 hour show.
It's only 1 hour. Sometimes we'll go over. I've done 3-hour long streams here, but it's not the norm. It's not what we usually do. It's not what we usually do. But Timcast is a great time. It was great meeting you there. And
Yeah, it was
man,
fun.
you actually suggested this story. It's something I'd been thinking about, but I had almost forgotten about it because I just have a million and one different things coming at me. But Max Miller telling Lizzie Marbach not to speak about her faith in Jesus Christ publicly, it was insane. And I responded to this on Twitter. I'm sure you have your own thoughts about this. We were chatting about it a little bit before the show, but it's so frustrating. I have a friend named Orrin McIntyre who one thing he'll do is whenever you have someone on the left tweet with a certain buzzword like our democracy or one of these phrases, he'll ask, what does this phrase mean in this sentence? And I was very tempted to steal his line there and ask, what does the phrase religious liberty mean in this sentence? So for those of you who haven't seen it, this is the tweet. This is one of the most bigoted tweets I've ever seen. Delete it, Lizzie. Religious freedom in the United States applies to every religion. You've gone too far. Again, what does religious freedom mean in this sentence? Because all Lizzie said is,
to be fair,
Mhm.
why should he know that? He's only a member of the United States Congress.
I know. Well, there's the thing too. We're dealing with a Republican here. We're dealing with a Republican who said, "How dare you express your faith in God publicly? How dare you express your faith in Jesus?" Because what Lizzie said was, "There's no salvation without Jesus Christ." That's something I believe. That's something every Christian believes. Every real, sincere Christian who knows anything about their faith firmly believes that. It's kind of hard to be Christian without believing that.
And it's also, I mean, my understanding, not a Christian theologian, but I did go to school,
Mhm.
is that Christians are actually obligated
Mhm.
to tell others the good spiel,
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
good news. It's a religious obligation if you believe this to be true. I mean, because my rabbi,
Mhm.
one of my early teachers, said to me, "You're obligated to do Jewish outreach to your family and friends because you love them,
Mhm.
and you need them. You need to let them know that God does want a relationship with them, and that there is an instruction book, which we call the Torah,
Mhm.
which provides the method about the method of how Jews are to go about doing that. Um, Keeping it under your the light under a bushel, as they say, is not part of the plan, and it's so weird because we went from this idea, in the 50s, we first got this idea that you can't pray in school. Where do we get this idea? The Supreme Court invented it. They said, why is it a an offense to the separation between church and state? By the way, there's no separation between church and state in the
That's
Constitution.
no, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. This is something that came out of what I believe a letter between James Madison and a friend of his. This is not actually something that's enumerated.
I don't know if it was a friend of his or it might have been someone from OnlyFans, but yeah, basically. But we went for and what was the argument? Well, the children in the classroom who are not Christians are going to feel left out. They're going to feel that the government is sponsoring prayer and eventually sponsoring moments of silence. I mean, anything that could be construed. And
Our
that's
school, yeah, by the way, I just want to mention the elementary school I went to had to stop doing a moment of silence on 9/11, like the second year after 9/11, because people had that concern. But I'm sorry, continue.
people,
Yeah.
people,
Yeah. Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
And we went from there to not only can government institutions like socialized school or what they call public schools um, not even give the appearance of endorsing monotheism, much less Christianity as such. But now, as reflected in the tweet by Max Miller, you can't even in the public sphere, in just in the civic discourse, you can't express a preference for your own religion. Okay, so what she said was, and I'll tell you something of the thinking. People, Jews who are not well educated about Judaism or who are not particularly practicing, are very bothered. I remember people are always saying to me, "You know why the evangelicals like Israel so much? Because they believe that at the end of days, all the Jews have to be."
Will be converted. Yeah. Yeah.
What the hell do you care what they believe? Do you believe what they believe? All right, then. Let them believe what they want to believe, and you believe what you want to believe. Meanwhile, there are friends. There are friends, and we should accept their friendship. People are so hung up that they think that it is that freedom of religion is somehow encroached by someone saying, "I'm a Christian, and what Christianity teaches." It's true. She didn't say Christianity teaches that because to her, because what people don't
Because then you
understand.
don't believe it. If you're saying
Ah,
if you're talking about it in a removed way, you don't
that's right.
actually believe in it.
Our religion teaches no, 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 not our religion teaches. God gave the Torah to
Mhm.
Moses on
Mhm.
Mount
Mhm.
Sinai.
Mhm.
That is what we live with as a
Mhm.
reality as Jews. That is what we live with. So it's not like, according to our religion. You see, look, I've got a book here. This is what our religion says. That's nice that you have a book, but
Mhm.
what is your
What do you
what's
believe?
because you're not going to conduct yourself according to the tenets of your religion if it is merely a flavor or preference or something like Ron Coleman, 5'10", uh, I was white hair, I guess. All these things and oh yeah, and also he's a Jewish guy. No, who I am, Ron Coleman is a person who is an observant Jew. So he blew it, and as he had to walk it back. But the mere fact that it even occurred to him to say, and as you point out,
Exactly.
it wasn't just he said, "Goslas, you might make some people feel uncomfortable with that. Let's try to keep it ecumenical," which is bullshit. There's no reason you have to keep it ecumenical at all.
Agreed.
At all.
Agreed.
Just that you got to be prepared for the slings and arrows that'll come your way. If you don't, on the merits. One thing I never do on Twitter, and there's little that I won't do on Twitter,
Mhm.
but one of the things I won't do on Twitter is apologetics.
Mhm.
I won't have a debate on the merits of this or that religious tenet, except with other Jews. If they start poking around, at Orthodox Jews based on their ignorant concepts. Um, but instead, what he said was, "You want to put it up on the screen again because I think people really have
Yeah.
to see this
This
with their own eyes."
is ridiculous. I can zoom in on it a bit too.
This is one of the most bigoted tweets I've
I
ever
have ever
seen.
seen. I mean, what this is. something which really epitomizes what separation of church and state actually means to most people. Max Miller is saying the quiet part loud. What separation of church and state means is never mention Jesus Christ ever. That's what it means. Because if this was a Christian, for example, saying the same thing to a Jew or a Muslim, their career would be over without question. I mean, that would be it. Now, I hope that because Max Miller is a Republican, and therefore they have to court more conservative voters who are more likely to be Christian and take their faith seriously, that their career is going to be greatly damaged by this. I appreciate that they apologized for it, but as you mentioned, for this to come to someone's head in the first place, firstly, like, you're completely misunderstanding what separation of church and state actually means by the letter, even though you are basically acknowledging what it means or what the subtext of it is. That said, this is someone who's just showing their contempt for Christians here.
So, I mean, I will tell you again that his reaction as a person who basically isn't religious
Mhm.
is what Lizzie Marbach is saying is that there's no hope for me, Max Miller, outside of having faith in Jesus Christ alone. And you know what, Max? From the point of view of Lizzie Marbach, that is true.
Mhm.
That is what Lizzie believes. She's entitled to believe it and entitled to say it. Do you find that intimidating? Give me a call. I'll introduce you to a rabbi, maybe one of my many fine rabbinic sons, who can explain to you why it shouldn't bother you so much. But either way,
Give me a call and I'll introduce you to a priest and we'll bring you into the Catholic Church. We'll pray for you, Max.
so we are, you're not allowed to say this publicly, but since no one, well,
No one watches this show, so you can just
well,
say it.
compared to my show, people watch this show, but Christians, Orthodox Christians, which
Mhm.
by including Roman Catholics
Mhm.
and Orthodox Jews, have more in common theologically than Orthodox Jews and Reformed Jews.
Hmm.
We both believe that the Torah is of divine origin and that the Bible is the word of God and that God exists and that God created the world and et cetera and et cetera. Oh, sure, there are some major differences.
Major differences.
But the point is, once you come into the category of there's such a thing as absolute truth, and there
Mhm.
is such a thing as revealed truth. Divine revelation is a real thing, and it's not just any old thing. It's not just the golden rule. It's specifically these things. That separates us from I adopt the platform of the Democratic Party as my religion, and that will determine what's good and right and what I should do.
Mhm.
So
Well, and this is oh,
Max and
sorry.
I are going to have to sit down. That's all.
Yeah, well, no, this is interesting too because this is a conversation I've had with a good friend of mine who's Jewish. She's more orthodox in her beliefs. She's certainly more conservative, and she was telling me about people in her community who were Reformed Jews and some of the arguments that they'll make and things that they say. And I wish I could tell you that that kind of person doesn't exist in Christianity, but they do. There are
Oh,
these very
of course.
modern wishy-washy Christians who want to have acceptance for LGBTQIAP, who don't want to evangelize, who would agree with Max that that tweet was bigoted and shouldn't have been tweeted, who completely deny any like biblical truth or doctrine. I mean, these people are out there, and it's very cringe-inducing because on some level you feel as if what they're doing is behaving in a way that will gain them more cultural acceptance. But it just comes off as very patronizing to everyone, people in the culture and also people of faith, because it seems like this middle point. You're trying to cover the like wrap the medicine in sugar, and you're actually giving me all sugar and no medicine, so there isn't really value here, and it comes off as really obnoxious. So this is something I've said frequently about some of the, I won't even call them reforms. I'll say I think some of the abuses of the liturgy that have occurred after Vatican II. A lot of the changes that happened in churches after Vatican II were not called for by Vatican II. If you actually read the documents of Vatican II, they're really very conservative and traditional in many ways. For example, they say all things being equal, Gregorian chant must be given pride of place in the liturgy. When was the last time you went to a Catholic church and heard Gregorian chant? Almost only at the Latin Mass.
He
It's
asked
very,
rhetorically.
yeah, exactly. It rarely happens. And so you had all these reforms. They weren't really reforms, they were abuses. And the justification was always, we have to get with the times and act like the world. Okay, well, the issue is the world is going to do the world better than you, right? The world is going to give people a better version of that. You have to give them the faith. But a lot of these churches have refused, and it's very sad. Now, I went off on a tangent here, but just speaking of it, she mentioned that something this rabbi said during a prayer ceremony was they referred to God as that which we call God, which cracked me up. I said, like, did you call her? Did you say she's that which we call a rabbi? There's no other context where we consider that respectful. That which we call God. Okay, so then you're an atheist. You don't believe in him.
That's when people refer to the universe.
Yes, the universe. The universe has a plan for you. The universe. I mean, that's pantheism. Yeah, yeah, exactly. The universe is not a conscious entity. It's
What
frustrating.
can we do except make everyone listen to more and more of Ron Coleman discussing this with on the Seamus podcast, and setting everybody straight. You know, look, there's the desire for cultural acceptance, right? But then there's also the idea that people want to be on the team. Look,
Mhm,
my friend Yoram Hazoni,
mhm.
I went to school with. I'm not a big name dropper, but that's a name I like to drop. He's a great
Do you
guy.
drop my name to people ever? Or you're like, I was going on Seamus Coughlin's podcast, you know?
Uh, anyway, my wife thinks I'm writing some interrogatory responses now or something. Okay, so
Okay, you had to bend the truth a little bit to make the time to do this. I understand. If she knew
so
that, if she knew that was shame, or she'd be like, "Please, come on, there's important things to do around the house. Like this is."
show me the money. Show me the money. But this is what I do. This is who I am. Yeah, this is the mortgage bill. Yeah, okay. So then, which it's a bona fide thing. That a lot of people have trouble with this concept. I think
Mhm.
we might have discussed this on Timcast. People say, "Why should I be Catholic? Why should I be Eastern Orthodox? Why should I be Jewish?" Just because my parents were. There's all of humanity has these different conceptions
Mhm.
of what God is and what the truth is, and precisely because that's the tradition into which you were born. That tradition is entitled, Yoram, I think, argues convincingly, it's entitled to a presumption of correctness because it made you who you are. It made your parents who they are, and your entire frame of reference is premised on the inputs. I mean, besides the obviously the supernatural aspect of it, but from a naturalistic point of view, you should assume that your parents are right. Now, the fact is, as a Christian and as a Jew, we recognize that a great many billions of people in this world are wrong.
Mhm.
But first of all, we're not comfortable. We're not uncomfortable saying they're wrong. We're also not
Mhm.
going over to where they live and cutting their heads off. We're entitled to have our opinions, and they're entitled to have their opinions. They're just wrong, and they're going to go to hell for it.
Well, and it's one of these things, but you touched on something important there. This is why there's an
Finally,
important Christian impulse to evangelize. This is why it's something I believe in. Um, I mean, I'd be thrilled if you came to faith in Jesus Christ, and I'll pray for you that you do because I really like you as a person. I
I
enjoy
appreciate
talking
that.
with you. I can't imagine how much more God enjoys you than I do because He made you and He made you as you are. And so I think I really want this man to know Jesus Christ, and it's not because here I am superior to you because I'm a Christian and you're a Jew. It's I got this get out of jail free card, which is knowing Jesus Christ. And I'm as much a sinner, if not more of a sinner, than anybody else. But I believe that, as Catholics, we don't say, I've been saved because you're working on your salvation until you die. And if you die in God's grace and friendship, you get to heaven. So I can't sit here and presume and say, I know I'm going to heaven.
Of
But I
course,
believe if I follow my faith, I will. And I want that for everybody. I want that for everybody else.
and that's entirely appropriate. And what religious freedom means, Max, is you can say it, we can hear it, we can even appreciate it and love you more for it because you care about us and our souls. And then we can have we could have a theological discussion. It wouldn't be particularly fruitful because
Mhm.
you're very well educated in your faith and I'm very well educated in my faith, and we know that there are simply points at which they diverge. But we're talking nonetheless from a very important shared platform, which people have to feel and more comfortable talking about. And that's one of the real problems with what Max did. And to some extent, the way it went on the internet was really a shame because it became a political thing and it became a way to shame a guy. I mean, I saw a lot of people even after he apologized, you know, in a rather unchristian manner. Um, well, but what did he mean by that, though? What you
Mhm.
know? I mean, okay, what he didn't say what he meant to say. Well, what did he mean to say, dude? He said something stupid. That's what he said. He
Mhm.
said something stupid on a million different levels. But let's be real clear about this. Jews don't agree with that statement of Christian faith, which is fundamental, which is like job one. Okay,
Mhm.
I get that, but that's exactly where we. So the problem, Max's problem, was feeling threatened by it. But just as she's allowed to say it, Max is allowed to say to his wife, right, or his kids, or even on Twitter if he wants to. He has to use the right terminology. I got to tell you, I think she's out of her mind. I think God loves everyone,
Mm.
and I think it's a real shame that anyone, if he wants to, but to call it, the mistake he made was calling it, a breach of freedom of religion in this country, and the worst tweet, the
The most bigoted tweet.
most.
I mean, think about the bar that has been set there. I've seen some horrible stuff on Twitter. And isn't everyone always complaining that because Elon Musk took over, Twitter's a safe place for Nazis now, and you're going to hear a lot of fascist, insurrectionist rhetoric? And this guy says that basically this woman's stating something that's really plainly written out in John 14:6, not quoting it, not even necessarily paraphrasing it, but touching on what that verse literally says, is the most bigoted thing he's ever heard. I mean, just the level of sensitivity there, the level of sensitivity. But I think that you're right. I think it would have been appropriate for him to have said, hey, I disagree with you. Here's why I disagree. And then you can have a fruitful discussion. But to say, like, shut up, Christian, you're not allowed to say that because we have separation of church and state. Again, what does separation of church and state even mean there? And this is something I think would be kind of interesting to get into because you rightly pointed out that this is not something that's mentioned in the Constitution. And the separation of church and state, especially the way it's described, it's not even a coherent idea. So if you have like a pluralistic democracy, which is what we claim to be, where everyone has different religious values and everyone can vote, how on earth do you keep religious values separate from the political realm? You can't. I mean, you just so even just by a purely pragmatic democratic standard, not talking about whether we would want separation of church and state, but whether it's possible, it's literally not possible given the way the left refers to separation of church and state. Because this is a big term. Separation of church and state can mean anything ranging from we don't have a theocracy to no one is allowed to vote based on their religious values.
Right. No, you
Those
can't even. Right. Well, and think of all the
or
times
speak,
that
yeah.
they have cross-examined Catholic in particular,
Mhm.
Catholic judicial nominees, and said, "So what's going on here? The Pope's going to tell you how to vote? Is that
Exactly.
the Pope of Rome is going to be having a seat on the 11th Circuit? What do you mean? That's going back to what I said before. That's who I am. That's where my values come from. I was nominated not because I am a machine.
Mhm.
I'm a person. This is the person that I am. I'm obligated to follow the law.
Mhm.
I'm obligated to follow the Constitution. And when a ruling on the Constitution conflicts with my religious beliefs, that is a bona fide question. That's a hard question. It's one that I have had with others. And
For sure.
I
Yeah.
would never want to be a judge. But what would you do? And I think it's for Jews, it's even look. Jews have no business being in Congress, as far as I'm concerned. You could appoint me maybe for warm up a seat or something, like have a little fun, rock and roll. But Jews in exile should not really to be take leadership positions. It causes more anti-Semitism than it
Mhm.
causes admiration of Jews. So, that's a topic that's far beyond our
Interesting.
scope. But that's my view of the matter. Certainly not president or I mean, all those Jews in the Biden White House and all the anti-Semitic tweets you see based on the noticers,
Mhm.
and all these basement Nazis, these
Mm.
anonymous scumbags,
Mm.
um, and by and large, they're overwhelmingly not the more in the mindset of a Max Miller, who again is a conservative,
Hmm.
and but it really is revealing. If you go to conservative event conference, the world really is, even among conservatives, is divided into the evangelical slash Catholic crowd, and to a large extent, they mix these days
Yeah, in
politically.
politics, certainly. In
Yeah,
politics, certainly. I can speak to that in a moment, but yeah.
yeah. Well, actually, it's interesting to me because a lot of your phraseology
Hmm.
and the way you frame things sounds a little more evangelical to me than it
Hmm.
does Catholic.
I hope
Um,
not.
well, maybe you better look within
May
yourself. Maybe you
you
better
know,
speak to Father O'Shaughnessy about that.
well, no, I
In
think
the phone booth next weekend.
part of it, that might be true. I mean, obviously, I love Jesus, and I'll promote the church, I'll promote the sacraments, I'll promote Catholicism. I think if there's anything about me that sounds more evangelical, that might just be a product of the fact that when I am trying to persuade people, most of the people I find myself arguing with and needing to persuade are Protestants. So there are a lot of really awesome Protestant people in politics. And part of what's so beautiful about being Catholic is, even though we love our Bible, we love our scriptures, we believe there's more than that, right? You have scripture and tradition, and that's very important.
Well,
And
that's
I never
another thing that Catholics in particular and Orthodox Jews have in common.
in common. Yeah, that's
An
true.
oral tradition. You can't just open up a Bible and say, "Oh, the instructions are." And I said myself that the Torah gives you instructions about how to live. Yeah, but you're not qualified. With all due respect, you should
Mhm.
know it. You
That's
should
right.
know it. You should be familiar with it with the text, but you need training and tradition and background to interpret it. And it's such an un-American concept.
Yeah, well, and also that's very un-American. You look at like the fact that for hundreds and hundreds of years, the Torah in just the books of the Old Testament, aside from the Deuterocanon, all of the Hebrew and Aramaic books, if I'm not mistaken, they were written without vowels.
They're still written without vowels.
Yeah, and so in order to translate that, you need a strong oral tradition of knowing what this word. It's extremely difficult to translate something without vowels into English.
Well,
Uh,
especially because Hebrew is an analytic, not a synthetic language. In other words, English spelling, the word, although it's so
mhm,
idiosyncratic, but like Latin and like Germanic languages, at the end of the day, you pretty much have a consonant or vowel for every sound.
mm,
Hebrew, you have like the letter shin, which depending on where the dot is, can be a sin or a shin. It could be a sh or a su sound. So the story of Sibboleth and
mhm.
Shibboleth, you might remember, um, because one of the tribes had trouble pronouncing the sh sound. Um, so the entire meaning of passages can depend entirely on on these vagaries. But please go back to what you were saying about the discussions you have with Protestants.
Oh yeah, yeah, sure. So I think part of why maybe I might sound a little evangelical in some sense too is because I've spent the last 8 years living in Georgia, and it's just possible. And all of my, I think the best Catholics are almost always converts, and there are a lot of really great Protestant convert people who converted from Protestantism to Catholicism at my church and in my faith community. And
Protestantism, and you don't mean Episcopalianism,
it depends. So sometimes some, but some of them.
because they consider themselves Catholics already. Now they're just Roman
Well,
Catholics.
they're. I mean, they're
They stopped.
wrong. I love them, but they're
They
wrong.
stopped
But
Roman, and now they're Roman Catholic.
exactly, they stopped roaming and they came to Rome.
But I mean,
But
if you're telling me that you're meeting real Bible Belt
I'm
type,
talking like Bible Belt, like we're Lutheran prior, and then some like High Church Anglican, but jumped around a bit. But people who for a very long time and for most of their childhood, if they were raised in very strict Protestant homes, were just really taught the Bible in a way that most Catholics just don't invest in, unfortunately. That was one of the things. I love my parents. I had a great upbringing in many ways. One of the
where
real
did you grow up?
weeks,
What part of the country did you?
Chicago area
Oh,
originally.
okay, all right.
Yeah. And so, my parents, they did a great job teaching me the faith in any way. I don't begrudge them. I love them. They did fantastic. But I don't feel like I was really taught the Bible very well. At least not nearly as well. I knew the Bible better than all of my peers, But that doesn't mean anything when you're like in the Chicago area, right? That doesn't mean a lot. I started meeting, and to be fair, also up north, like the Protestants I knew didn't know the Bible very well either. So it could also be a regional cultural thing as opposed to a Catholic versus Protestant thing. But coming to the South, the people here who I've met know the Bible way better. And that's been very humbling, but it's helped me learn and grow tremendously. And that's one thing I say. I mean, it's again something I'm still learning, but I tell people all the time I'm not formally trained in theology, I'm not an expert, but if you're Catholic, read your Bible. It's a Catholic book. The church produced the canon. This is another part about scripture and tradition. There's nowhere in the inspired scriptures that list out a biblical canon. And one of the best attempts, I believe this was actually John Calvin who said this, one of the best attempts for trying to explain this is, well, the Holy Spirit just tells you in your heart that these books are scripture. I'm sorry, but no. I'm sorry, but no. That's just not how it works. It's not as if this is something that anyone can just pick up these books and the Holy Spirit will tell them which ones to assemble into the Bible. Like there's a reason we have scripture in tradition, and that Catholics believe in the ecclesiology we believe in. And I believe those things are all inseparable from the Bible itself. I believe you cannot get the Bible without those things, but that's a whole other very long discussion.
Yes, it is. But these the lack of understanding because of the way every discussion about traditional faith,
Hmm.
as opposed to modern religions like the holiness of transsexuality and the the transformation of pride from a deadly sin to something to be celebrated, and what exactly they're celebrating, I'm not clear about. I always remember like people have, I'm proud to be Dominican. I'm proud to be
Hmm.
What do you mean you're proud to be? What
Yeah.
did you accomplished something by being born to parents who came from Slovakia?
Mhm.
What do you I understand taking pride in your heritage and being connected to your I just spoke in favor of that. But anyway, there's there's really widespread ignorance, but especially yes, especially in the cities which have been denuded of traditional learning. It's funny because my wife and I both grew up. Um, well, I mean, she was much younger than I was at the time, but there used to be a show called Romper Room, and what I didn't realize until she told me this was that the Romper Room she watched, which is basically TV nursery school
Mhm.
for children who are still too young to go to nursery school. And she was watching a version of Romper Room that was local, probably broadcast out of Providence. And I was watching one that was broadcast out of New York. And she told me how Miss Jean used to say grace before they would have their snack. They didn't do that in New York on
Mm-mm.
Romper Room. It was just it was that would have been too religious even by the mid and late
Wow.
1960s. Um, the further away you get from the urban centers, which Jefferson was rightfully suspicious of for their, let's put aside his own personal morality
Yeah,
and not judge it
please.
necessarily, you know,
But let's certainly put it aside.
but it is. Look, I love being in the city. I love but it is a corrupting influence on people. There's no question about it. And
Yeah.
in any event, here we are. I mean, we're in this world, and you have people now. Now you have several generations of people among elites who have not gone to church on a regular basis. And they don't have these phrases ringing in their heads the way people of earlier generations did. And even if there was in that sort of Puritan tradition, that American Protestantism, which is really so Calvinistic and
Mhm.
so removed from a Catholic view, of course.
Mhm.
Um, Nonetheless, the people they did, as you said, they did know their Bible.
That's right, yeah.
They name, my children's names are Mordecai, Israel Asher,
Wow.
Abraham, and Moses.
Wow.
And
Wow.
it sounds like the Beverly Hillbillies.
Yeah. That's
I mean,
fantastic.
of course, we
So
don't.
can I ask you, was Israel, Jacob first, and then you brought him in to change that later, or
That's a very good question. So it's very funny. I actually was descended from a great sage in Poland who was what was known as a maggid. A maggid is an ethical preacher,
Hmm,
and so he was an outstanding scholar, and he had this apparently this ability to arouse people to a greater level of divine service. And his name was Yisrael Usher,
mhm.
and which I said, Israel Asher. So we named my second son after him, Israel Asher, Yisrael Usher, and he goes by Usher, or
Mm.
because we don't say Asher. You know, I was giving you the birth certificate
Yeah.
versions of everyone's names. And one time when my wife was working here in Newark, where I work now, she met one of these church going black ladies in her office after she'd had a baby. She says, "Oh, you're back. How's the baby?" "Oh, thank God, everyone's great." And what's the baby's name? Israel Asher. And the black lady says, "All right." To her, she thought that we were naming him after the country Israel. I don't think I'm not saying that she's ignorant of
Mhm,
who Israel is in the Bible, but
mhm.
I think she was thinking, just like in the '60s, it was kind of a thing in Black Power circles to name your children,
You thought she might have thought that it was
Uganda Jones, that kind of thing. In any event,
Oh my goodness. Yeah,
but
that's well, I should mention this actually. My name so Seamus is the Irish version or Gaelic version of James, which is the English version of Jacob. So it's
that James Jacob shift
yeah.
is one that has always mystified me. But
Yeah,
then
well,
again, you have
look,
people,
you get
you,
Dick out of Richard, you get, Jim out of James. I don't understand any of it
Ted
either.
out of Edward. How about that?
Yeah, that's weird. Or even Ned out of Edward. I don't yeah, wild.
So Seamus is James.
Yeah,
Okay.
Seamus is James, which is just the anglicization of Jacob.
And James is Jesus's brother, right?
Not his brother. Well, so we this is another difference between Catholics and Protestants. We don't believe that,
Ah,
he had brothers.
but because
So
that would really
mhm.
be, at best, he could be a half brother.
Yeah, so some people will argue, oh, Saint Joseph had a prior marriage. I don't believe that. I believe in the theory that Saint Joseph was young, and this was his first marriage. I believe Mary was a consecrated virgin who remained a virgin her entire life. It's notoriously difficult to translate certain like relational names from ancient languages. And so the term brethren could refer to brother or cousin or any kind of relative. It meant a lot of different things.
Yes, and a lot of people misinterpret. They open up a Bible and they're not reading Greek and they're not reading Hebrew or
Mhm.
Aramaic, and they're saying, "Well, look, it says right here," and you're reading a translator's choice of words.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
because if you familiarity with biblical Hebrew, we call the children of Israel Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, but it can also mean the sons of Israel, and it can also mean uh, you know the the people who are associated with Israel. I remember during the Iraq War, uh, everyone was laughing about how Saddam Hussein kept saying that this is going to be the mother of all battles. But no, that is a in Semitic languages that would be a way of expressing that it's going to be a mother effer of a battle.
Mhm. Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's giving birth to whatever.
Mhm.
But so people used to have biblical names, and everyone wasn't named. Yeah, and every time there was so you actually said something funny about how the relational kind of
Mhm.
decoding names and generations. Even in the Old Testament, when you have these long chains of generations, you see names being already repeated. There are several different Hanochs, for example, or and what is the word? Enoch.
Mhm.
Um, so I've been recently, there are tremendous um, resources available for um, genealogical research now. So I've
Well
been trying to put together, because of the internet, and I've been trying to figure out more about my family's background because it was our family was so utterly destroyed by the Holocaust, uh,
Mhm.
that we have very, very few records, and the majority of the relatives of the people who survived are dead. I mean,
Mhm.
well, they'd be dead by now anyway, but
Yeah.
they were murdered during the war. And whenever I think I
I'm
maybe
sorry.
have found a vein, oh, it's just part of growing up being us. I realize like what happens inevitably. Okay, so my son is Yisrael Usher is a
Mhm.
great 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 grandson of Yisrael Usher Fellner.
Mhm.
He has a first cousin Yisrael Usher Coleman because my brother also wanted to name a son after this great sage. Um, and you have this throughout families, and you have these staggered names because different people get married differently. There was a great rabbi in this country who came from Lithuania named Rabbi Aaron Cutler, and he is the founder. He was the founder of the great yeshiva, Talmudic Academy in Lakewood, New Jersey, and he was a tremendous genius and just outstanding personality. And Orthodox families, we tend to have lots and lots of children, like Catholics used to, I guess.
Yeah,
And
it's a big sad one to
right.
discuss.
So I once went to a wedding deep into the Lakewood circles, and the number of cards that said Aaron Cutler, because everyone had a grandchild who by now would be my age,
Mm,
who was named after the great Aaron Cutler who died in 1962.
mm.
So there were like 6 or 7 different Aaron Cutlers who by now I'm a grandfather.
Yeah.
They all have we don't name it, and in the Ashkenazi tradition, we don't give names of people who are still living. But
Oh, interesting.
right, so you don't have juniors.
Mhm.
The Sephardim are different. They do sometimes do that. But in any event, it can be very difficult trying to figure out those names as you said. And of course, even though the Irish invented writing for all practical purposes, I mean, if it hadn't been for the Irish monasteries,
That's true. Western civilization would be gone. It would just be gone.
and the Vikings did their level best to make sure that
Mhm.
that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, exactly. So you're welcome, everybody. By the way, okay, it was my ancestor. This is hilarious because this is one thing my Catholic friends will make fun of me for because they're like it's a diverse group. Some of them are Italian, some of them are Hispanic, some are just different. They're not all Irish Catholics. We're in the South here, even though it's a relatively Irish city. But they'll say like Ireland had the highest, was like one of the most Catholic countries in the world, had the highest vocation rate and did not produce a single notable theologian in all of history. It's like, all right, you know what? We made our contribution. Okay, we saved the Western lexicon. We literally copied all of that over in the Dark Ages. It would all be gone. You're welcome.
Good work with the snakes, though. Let,
Yeah. Well, that
that
was St.
was
Patrick. But that thing is, he was not actually ethnically Irish. He came to Ireland and evangelized it. So we can't. The snakes he drove out of Ireland were actually Irish people. It was the Druids. It was the Druid beliefs because the snake was the symbol that they used to represent themselves and had on all their currency. So that's what that means. You got rid of the bad actors. You got rid of the paganism.
well. That's actually fascinating because I actually just saw a video by this tremendous YouTuber Simon Whistler
Hmm.
about the Pied Piper.
Hmm.
What's the story behind the Pied Piper? And apparently there was a real long time ago, like before, like early medieval times, some kind of event that happened in Hamelin in Germany where a bunch of somethings followed a piper out of town. And a pied means colored. Did you know that? He wore a colored frock. And he was it rats or was it children? Did
Interesting.
and they found a this goes actually right back to our linguistic point. They found an inscription that said it has now been 100 years since our children left. Does our children mean the children, which is terrifying, or does it mean the children of our city now that because the economy of the Rhine district
Yeah.
changed, and the children, the as we say in Hebrew, the bnei ha'ir, the
Mhm.
children of the city, the people who were
Yeah.
natives of that city. So
Mhm.
what we've determined today is that everything we know is wrong, except the things that we really have to be sure are right. Like stuff
Mhm.
we know about history and like you need if you don't have that tradition from people that you trust. And
Yeah.
that doesn't mean you stop being skeptical. Like, you're entitled to use your brain when you have hard
You're
questions.
required to. You are required to use
And
your
then
brain. God
you go to
gave
a
you an
scholar. You
intellect.
go
Mhm.
to a scholar, you go to someone who truly is, and I'm not saying that everyone can always be satisfied with the answers. But another un-American thing is sometimes you may not be satisfied with the answer, but you must accept it.
I also think that, and this is an important thing to remember, often you being unsatisfied with the answer can be an indication that it's a very good answer because you probably couldn't handle the truth. This is something that I try to keep in that's right. This is something I try to keep in mind whenever I'm reading theology. Whatever explanation makes me less comfortable is the one I'm more inclined to believe. So, reading about the debate between the Thomists and the Molinists, I tend to side with Aquinas on basically everything. His position on this makes me very uncomfortable on an emotional level, but that's why I'm in part more inclined to believe it
Oh,
because
so you're
my heart
saying
is
you bring
truthful.
yourself around to siding with Aquinas, not because you instinctively agree with him. On the contrary, he's pushing you in a direction. It's kind of like I should be
Makes me
forgiven for the.
uncomfortable, but makes sense. Like, it makes sense. It's logical. I can reason through it and say that all lines up, but it makes me feel very uncomfortable. And I think when there's two different explanations and one explanation, and they're both sound, but it's not clear which one is right or wrong. One of my tools for discernment is what would be easier for me to believe? Like, because if that's easier for me to believe, there's probably some likelihood that I'm engaging in some kind of mental gymnastics to make a less persuasive case seem more persuasive. Um,
Possibly. I mean,
Possibly. That's
Occam's
not
razor is not so readily dismissed, right? I mean,
yeah,
there's
I
something to be.
agree. No, I guess my point is that I'm being a little facetious, and this isn't my primary tool for determining whether I believe something, but there are a few theological matters where I've gone, "Okay, this position makes me really uncomfortable." I think it I think it might be true in part because of that, because, like, why would it come so naturally to me? And again, most it's not like I read Aquinas and go, I'm so uncomfortable, but I agree. For the most part, I'm like, oh, that's perfect. That's great. I love that. But every now and again, I come across a passage and, this is a difficult saying. And I go,
What does make you listen, it does help you to grow by
"Mhm.
challenging yourself. I'm I could have had a much higher GPA in college, which would not have been that
You
difficult
too?" Yeah.
if I had not majored in economics.
Mm.
But I knew that I would grow more intellectually by majoring in that it would be better for I
For
could be a
you.
history major and just
Mhm.
read millions of history books, and and I would be in my natural element. But you're there in college to grow, to press
That's
yourself.
right.
Uh, I actually think it paid off. Uh,
Yeah,
but
you seem to be doing pretty well.
well, that's
I
only
think
because I have a very nice green screen. You can't. I'm not. Believe me.
well, you're able to afford to buy a nice looking background from somebody.
Yeah, no, that's right. I just bill it all to Harmeet Dillon. Since I know she doesn't listen, if she ever listened to a podcast that I've been on, she certainly wouldn't listen this deep into it. So I can at this point, all the stuff I told you was off limits.
Mhm.
It's now the
Now
children have
now
gone
it's
to
the
sleep.
time now that we're in the last, 10 minutes or so, now that we've passed that 49-minute mark.
I
Well, no,
can't believe that neither one of us, neither Harmeet nor I, is an unindicted co-conspirator in Georgia. I am so disappointed.
yeah, with this indictment, just tell me everything that you can as a legal expert here. What's going on? Is
It's
this
hot.
political prosecution, or do you think that there's a real case they've got here against old DT?
No, what? Listen, there's nothing to talk about. It's hot garbage in the worst way. It's preposterous. It's hypocritical. It's cynical. What's really interesting, the only really interesting thing, is that we've reached a point as a society where the party in charge feels comfortable doing things that might just in their worst moments have popped into their heads a generation ago, and they would instantly dismiss and think it was something I ate. They now do it and run on it and raise funds on it, and they're completely comfortable with it. And all the traditional voices of reason and sanity and moderation are silent. It it is a complete crack up, and it really raises the question of whether the experiment of limited, democratic republicanism is absolutely doomed, because the tools are there for us to withstand this. And we do forget because we only live in the moment and we've lived through some very decently good times until fairly recently.
Yeah.
Um, but our country, as every country, has gone through some terrible political and legal and constitutional crises.
Oh, absolutely.
And sometimes I say to myself, can this really be like? Can this really be happening? The Constitution and the rule of law are being so utterly trod upon and treated with such utter contempt and disrespect. And then I have to remind myself that no, actually, that's happened a lot. If it's really happened quite a bit, and there's always been a great deal of partisanship. And I had Michael Malice on my
He's
podcast.
great.
Michael is great, although he needs God.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand, I did so he has his new book is The White Pill.
I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Difficult to read, very sad, obviously, but
Yes.
very well done.
And I said, "So Michael, you really seem to believe in the soul because this is about how the soul overcomes that the core, the spiritual humanity. In other words, you're not making Ayn Rand proud with that sort of appeal to
Mm.
a vaguely spiritual
Hmm.
truth that will over by which that makes good overcome bad. Oh, and this is a little bit of what the discussion when I was sat in on the fourth hour with you guys and Jack, and both he and Ian were saying history is written by the winners and good and bad. That's wrong. That's wrong. There is good and bad, and good does win out because God runs the world. And he may make us have to go through very, very, very long periods of awfulness, much longer than we could tolerate as individuals, in order to meet the divine plan, which we may or may not, most of us don't understand. Getting back to our point, this is one of those periods.
Yeah.
This is one of those periods, and it's an odd thing indeed that Donald Trump should be the lens through which, or the prism through which this light must pass, because he's, I mean, he's an historical figure in a way that none of us ever thought that he would be,
Never expected. Never expected. It's remarkable.
and he's handling it so well.
I know. So it's obviously a horrible situation, but I agree with you that there is hope here. There's always hope. And I think one of the best white pills is just to understand that goodness is genuinely the only viable long-term strategy. Evil destroys itself and it destroys everything around it. We talk about our society's war on marriage. But here's the truth: our society will never destroy marriage, it will only destroy itself by trying to disassemble the family, because from the ashes, there will rise families. Once again, this is just the way humans are going to organize themselves. No matter what the state tries to do, no matter what ideologues try to do, no matter how badly socialists want to create the new man or new woman, they will fail eventually.
That's right.
Now, they might take our country down with them, and that's what we're trying to prevent. But what we do know is that truth will win. Truth will inevitably win. Doesn't mean our country is going to be around when it wins. That's what's frightening. That's what we want to fight for. Doesn't mean your family's going to survive it. Doesn't mean your friends are going to survive it. Doesn't mean your career is going to survive it. Whatever it is you're concerned about at whatever level. But truth will win. And one thing I said to a group of high schoolers I was speaking to and college students a couple months ago when I was asked to speak for YAF was, with most wars, with warfare as we traditionally think of it, at the beginning of the war, you know what side you're on. And then through battle, you find out who wins. Spiritual warfare is the exact opposite. At the very beginning, you know who is going to win. And through battle, you figure out which side you're on. How did I approach these issues? How did I fight these battles? Did I lose my soul in my attempt to forward my movement? And if you did, you ended up not actually being on the side of good all along. And I think that's also something for conservatives to try to remember. Good is going to win. And if you compromise your values and you try to do the wrong thing, you try to do evil that good might come of it, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you're going to lose the war, not because good will lose, but because you won't be good.
And I'm having this argument with people all the time who think that I'm a rhino
Hmm.
because I say, no, 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 just because the Democrats do that doesn't mean we should do it. Don't you want to win? Don't you realize that this is an extinction? No, 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 no. That's not winning.
Well, I will say this though. I mean, the Republicans actually have reasons to indict the Biden family. All of this Trump stuff is totally, for lack of a better term, trumped up charges. It's nonsense.
Right, of
We
course.
could act, I mean, it would
No, no,
not be
no.
the
I'm
same.
not.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
not. That's not the example that I'm referring to.
Okay, okay,
Because, but
okay.
absolutely, but that they should have been indicted decades ago. He's been a racketeer for
Mhm.
his entire career.
That's right. That's right. I mean, a phony and a liar and a thief. It's remarkable. It is remarkable. He's
But
just,
he's a devout Catholic.
yeah, right. Good for him. Look, I mean, this is what I try to point out to people. Devout Catholic, and this is, they've started to say devout. They don't say practicing as much anymore. And I don't know if it's intentional, but the thing is, devout can kind of mean anything to anyone. There's no definition.
Spirituality.
Exactly. But practicing Catholic actually means something. There's a definition of that. There's a certain set of criteria that you actually have to meet in order to be considered a practicing Catholic, which Joe Biden does not, objectively. This is not my opinion. He's not a practicing Catholic. He's a baptized Catholic. He's not a practicing Catholic. So if you're going to say he's devout Catholic, like maybe he's devout at something and he's, a baptized Catholic and you can push those two things together. But no, Joe Biden's not a devout Catholic. He's not even a practicing Catholic. How he
He's
doesn't
not
believe.
even sentient, really.
That's also true. It's also true. I don't know how this is. So we were talking about this earlier with people proselytizing and evangelizing. I don't. I know that not all religions have the same evangelistic impulse, but if one's religion does, and this is generally how I feel about like talking to my Protestant friends, for example. Like if a Protestant I meet isn't trying to convert me or plant seeds, I don't
Mhm.
trust them as a person. I don't. They're never going to convert me, but God willing, I will die in a state of grace in the Catholic Church. But if they're not
Why
even going
don't
to
they?
try,
Why don't they care that you're worshiping the
yeah.
Antichrist of Rome?
If that's what they think, because that's what they believe. Many of them do really believe that Catholics aren't even really Christian and all these other horrible, untrue things. But dude, if you believe that and you're not trying to evangelize, you're not trying to proselytize and rescue me, then we're not friends. We're not friends at all. You think I'm going to go to hell and you're not trying to stop that from happening.
And I really do believe that this all goes back to the false, a complete misunderstanding of what tolerance means and what pluralism means and what religious freedom means, and what it really should mean is you have liberty. You have liberty to worship and express the truth as you understand it, not your
Mhm,
truth.
mhm.
Oh, you can have your truth. I get that. You can express it, but I don't have to respect it. I don't have to respect it. That's another. I mean, that's another thing. Also, well, respect. You got to respect what he has to say. Why do I have to respect what he has to say? And what is he in any way this person who's like trashing? It's internet people who attack religious people. They never have a actual point of view. All
Rarely.
they It's always destructive. It's always
Mhm.
terrorism. It's always easy to destroy things, but they never posit an affirmative paradigm that they believe does make sense. What can I
Well,
tell you?
I would say now more so than ever, oftentimes respecting a person's belief actually means to disrespect them. So if a man comes up to me and says, I'm a woman, call me a woman, I am sorry. Not only would I be disrespecting the truth, but I would be disrespecting you as a man if I were to call you a woman. So to sit here and say respect his beliefs when respecting his beliefs would actually be disrespecting him, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it because it disrespects the truth, first and foremost. But the thing is, if you disrespect the truth, then you are disrespecting whoever you're speaking to, because what you're essentially saying is, you're a child, you can't handle reality. I'm going to try to hide it from you.
That's where we are now. That's where we
Mhm.
are now. Everyone
Right.
is a child, and as my wife, who is a female
Mhm.
and was assigned femaleness well before birth.
That's so lucky how those things lined up for her.
Yes, and she has upheld it in extraordinary fashion. Um, she says the men have all become women. They've all become feminized. Men are supposed to be the ones who see things in concrete terms. This is a man, this is a woman, this is a rock, this is a building. I'm going to make a bridge. Here's how we do it. Not how do you feel about getting across the river.
Mhm.
Not let's talk about how we relate to the river. No, I need a bridge that's going to go across the river and I need a man to make it.
Well, so this is a huge topic, and this actually again gets us into something we have in common, which we were referencing earlier, but Genesis and the creation narrative. I know that traditionally Catholic theologians have actually described Adam and Eve's sin a bit differently. They've actually enumerated the particular sins that Adam committed and the particular sins Eve committed differently. So some people will try to, mischaracterize Christianity and also Judaism by proxy by saying, well, what they believe and what Genesis says is men are great, and then the evil women showed up and caused sin, and it's a very misogynistic story that says woman bad, man good. I mean, nothing can be further from the truth. One of the things that we are taught as Catholics was one of Adam's sins is he was letting his wife speak to a snake. He was letting a snake speak to his wife. That's a clear abdication. That is a clear abdication of one's role as a man. And part of what the effects, and this is again part of Catholic theology. I'm not sure if this is a belief we would share, but we believe, and I've heard many theologians and priests say that the effects of the fall have affected men and women. We're all fallen, we all have original sin, but they've affected us differently. There are certain ways that fall affected men, such that men tend to be more predisposed to certain sins and women to others. And we see this with the punishments God lays out, right? So, for example, a woman will have pain during childbirth. The man will, till the land and have toil and suffering in his work. And in both of those things, that's like the productive aspect of the man and the woman are attacked, and men and women are productive in different ways, so like that's just going to manifest differently. And I think one of the ways original sin manifests for men is because and this is also something theologians have said, Adam ate the apple because he didn't want to be separate from his wife. One vice men struggle with, one sin men struggle with, is failing to stand up for the truth because they don't want to be disunited from a woman. This is something we see in our culture constantly. I'm not going to stick up for the truth because
Simps.
simps. That's right. And what people don't want to acknowledge is because of original sin, simping is built into the fallen nature of men. Like if you don't guard against that, you will become weak and fail to stick up for the truth when you need to.
But you guys, but you imposed monogamy
Mhm.
on the Western world, and that was the beginning of the end.
How
Okay,
evil.
that was the no. The fact is, I mean,
Oh, do you really?
the preferred relationship in the Torah schema is classically yes, a man and a woman.
Mhm,
But the idea that you and after all, Adam and Eve are one man and one
mhm,
woman, and they
mhm,
are the primeval couple.
mhm.
But monogamy does shift a massive amount of power to women that they otherwise would not have had. And then, of course, in ancient times, men had to wait until their wives died in childbirth before they'd have to marry another woman. You still could marry 6 or 7 women. You just would have to get them pregnant, and then they would die in childbirth, and then you pick up another one. But the fact is that is something that traditional religion actually did that favors women.
Yeah, well, I think that this is it's huge, right? That monogamy is always expressed to be this misogynistic way of controlling women's bodies. It's the exact opposite. I mean, it's an insurance policy. It's good for men and for women. If something's good for women, it's good for men and vice versa. We're built to complement each other. But monogamy is so important and it protects women. And you just think about how obviously predatory this belief that women should just be sleeping around is. This belief that a man should be with as many women as he wants. Okay, when a guy says a woman should be with as many men as she wants, what he's really saying is women should be more sexually available to me. Almost always. And that's what the sexual revolution was all about. Huge part of what it was about, I should say, was just men trying to remove women from the structure that kept them protected and place them in a paradigm
And
where
they
they were completely vulnerable.
and they succeeded, and then women took up the cause themselves and have subsequently undermined everything,
Hmm.
everything.
Hmm.
And contraception, of course.
Yes. Well, that's the center of the bullseye. People don't realize this. When I'm doing these podcasts and someone says something like, I'm starting to think that this all started going downhill when the Supreme Court said states had to recognize homosexual unions as marriage. No, my friend, this started going downhill. The only reason that was possible is because we removed sex from a procreative context, and we said this is something that's just about pleasure, and we removed the logos from it. And now this was just all about pleasure and using another person. And so our culture really would not be where it is, and we would not have been able to have a sexual revolution if it wasn't for the pill, if it wasn't for like effective and reliable methods of contraception. It just couldn't happen.
And really people, and even old men such as myself can't remember a time, but can't remember what life was like before then.
Mhm.
But monogamy was such an extraordinarily protective institution, and marriage was,
Mhm.
and legitimacy was, and the idea of an inferior status for bastardy was. All these things protected the vast. And see, again, we've gone from a world in which we say we're going to protect the overall structure and the overall health and the overall ability of a society to strengthen and grow and reproduce itself ad infinitum, or until God decides the next stage of human history has come,
Mhm.
to not only tolerating but celebrating minorities. I don't mean minority groups. I mean
Mhm.
people with unusual or abnormal sexual interests and appetites, and shifting everyone else's interests. You go into a place like any of the major train stations, Grand Central Station. That room used to be full of benches. People waiting for trains used to be allowed to sit down. All the benches in public spaces are gone or almost worthless because we decided in the 60s, not in an, and it wasn't an unreasonable calculus that was made at the time, because mental institutions were so horrid
Mhm.
and outcomes in mental health treatment were so awful. But we're no longer going to basically jail people for being
That's right.
mushuga.
Mhm.
We're gonna treat them, and unless well, we've given over our world, our spaces, to the mentally ill and the drug addicted and the violent, who are really still a minority of society.
And that's why you
We
get a Daniel Penny situation, right? You just have some lunatic on the subway screaming at people, and someone has to step in and do something.
And if he does, he will be punished.
That's right. That's absolutely right. No,
Trevor,
I agree.
there's no. Let's face it. There's no stopping us from doing this for another 3 or 4 hours. Because
I
I
know.
told
I'm
you,
sorry. I'm
a
sorry. I
Jewish
gotta. Yeah.
a Jewish man from New York. There's nothing I don't have an opinion on. And
Let me tell you something. The Irish aren't so different. We
oh
will
no, that's
run
right.
our
And
gobs for quite a while.
that's
Yeah.
right. You are known as having the gift of gab, and usually with a pleasant choice of words as well.
Well, thank you. I hope that I lived up to that standard, and it was fantastic having you on.
Well, a real pleasure, and I hope we get to do it again. And of course, you will, next time you'll come on my show.
I'd love to go on your show.
It's a
Yes,
deal.
absolutely.
All right. Well,
Anytime. Anytime. Is there anything you want to promote to my audience before you head on out of here?
you know what? People should look for Ron Coleman Lawyer on YouTube, because it's embarrassing. I have 230,000 followers on Twitter. I
That is
don't.
embarrassing.
I don't have 10,000 subscribers on YouTube.
You got to get those numbers up.
Okay,
Yeah. Let's
it's
tell your audience. Are
it's
you
anti-Semitism.
are you harassing your audience? Are you telling them to subscribe? You gotta get on that grind.
It's the single most bigoted.
Thing you've seen on Twitter.
Eh,
Listen, Ron, you got to get on what we call the Sigma grind set. Okay. You got to start promoting this heavily to your audience. You got to let them know I've got a YouTube channel. Go over there and watch it now.
I do. People are, and it's amazing how I'm supposed to be an influencer. I can't influence 10,000 people. Live and learn. Live and learn.
How often are you promoting it? How often do you tell people?
Every podcast episode that I upload to my YouTube channel is, which is weekly, I promote on, I say latest Coleman Nation is on here, and boom, and moving people from platform to platform is really, really hard.
Oh,
And
believe me, I know.
and
I
I've
know.
had a devil of a time, doing it, and it really I mean, 'cause and also the part of my problem is, first of all, A, I don't stream. That's really where the
That's
juice is,
you should
and
start.
also, I am such a natural Twitter creature. It is just perfect for me. But, on the other hand, the long form has its charms as well, and I've had some really great guests. I mentioned I mean, I've had theological discussions of a similar nature to this one with Michael Knowles a couple times. You know,
Knowles,
it's
he's
it it
great. We
he's a
love
g he
Knowles. Don't tell him I said anything good about him, but I think he's great.
it's important he has enough self-esteem excesses as it is, believe me,
Yeah, I
just because
know.
he's so damn good looking and smart and
Why
successful.
would you say that? See, I don't agree at all. But on that note, it was great having you. Uh, everyone, check out Ron Coleman's work,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna
Find
also
me,
you find him. You'll find him.
you'll
Just
find me.
Google him.
You
Go on
have to put the
Twitter.
word lawyer in, or else you're gonna get a very, very large bodybuilder with a very different complexion from mine. Don't just look for Ron Coleman on
All right,
YouTube.
let
You
me
need
just let's warn the audience. Ron Coleman. Let's see what happens when you look this up. Um, Ron Coleman. Wow, this is I was gonna say this is what you looked like before you started using Twitter regularly. That is not good for your health. But thank you again for stopping by to my
okay,
wonderful.
you wanna see? I mean, I know
Oh, we're
this is a
fine.
family show.
We're quite fine. But to everyone in the audience who does want to see something behind the scenes, hit that red join button and become a member of our locals community. All right, it's totally free. You'll get updates. We do a fan Q&A once a month at least. You guys will be able to be a part of that. So again, hit the red join button to hop on over there to locals
No
communities.
upsells, by the way. It's free. All
100%
services,
free.
no upsells.
Well,
Nothing.
I didn't say that. We will
No, you
upsell you on
didn't,
certain
did you?
things.
No, you
No, no.
didn't, did you?
What are you doing right now? This is ridiculous. You can't just let me pitch to my audience. This is the last time I bring a lawyer on to try to convince
Oh,
people
at
to
least a lawyer as good as
support
I
my
am.
show. Yeah. Unbelievable.
Get out of
Listen,
here.
if you can watch the fan Q&As. Here's the upsell. Here's the upsell. Here's the upsell. There's going to be certain content we're going to start putting up there, which is only going to be for people who pay. And also, if you want that warm feeling in your heart at night of knowing you're supporting your favorite content creator, then you do have to.
And his dozens of Irish children.
That's right, my dozens of eventual Irish children. Thank you all so much. God bless you, and have a wonderful evening.